Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of In-Depth Guides. So this episode is focusing on Granpah, the very early game bird that you're able to find right on in the first patch of grass. And here's just the disclaimer page I leave up, but I'm gonna swap off of it right away. We'll jump right into it. So Granpah is a mono wind type Temtem. So its defensive type is actually really nice. It's only weak to one type, and it has two resistances to boot. However, as an offensive type, pure wind is not that great because it's resisted by two types, which is electric and wind itself. And meanwhile, it's only able to hit toxic for super effective damage. So defensively, Granpah is super good, but offensively, it's kind of falls short, at least typing wise. If we look at its stats, we can see that its HP, defense, and special defense are all pretty dang high. This is a really well-rounded Tem as far as bulk. All of it's respectable, and when you have this much HP with some solid defensive stats, it just becomes really tanky and kind of hard to deal with. It's got really bad stamina, and this is kind of the bad point about Granpah, is that the stamina solo, you basically need a stamina item to supplement the stamina, or else you're only going to be able to be on the field for like 2 turns reasonably, or you'll have to invest like 300 TVs. It's kind of absurd. 78 speed. This is above the curve, but nothing crazy. You're not really outspeeding the main threats that you want to, the other times that run max speed, and you're not really outspeeding anything slower that runs max speed. Maybe like a Nesla, but that would be about it. Because this Grandpa's a special attacker, so the attack stat it doesn't really need. And the special attack is it's not crazy high, but it's definitely enough to work with to make Grandpa a damage dealer. And with that special attack paired with its two damage boosting traits are kind of what give Grandpa at least some offensive pressure. First of them is Last Rush. Last Rush increases the damage that Grandpa deals by 40% if there are, I mean, I can just click on the page. If there's more opponents alive than you. So basically, if your opponent has 3 Tems alive and you only have 2, then the Grandpa will deal 40% extra damage. However, if you have the same amount of Tems, like you both have 2 Tems, then you don't get the boost. So it's only a damage boost when you're behind, but the damage boost of 40% is really nuts. So there's been some people historically who have paired Last Rush with sacrifice users, so you get the defensive buff, and also for at least a short period of time you get the offensive 40% boost. Its other trait is Bully, which recently got reworked, where the damage dealt is increased by 25%, so less than Last Rush, but instead of being behind in Tems, it's whenever your opponent's afflicted by a negative status condition. I gotta put the emphasis on negative. So there's a whole page on like negative status conditions on the wiki. So it's sleep, burn, cold, frozen, exhausted, isolated, poisoned, seized, trapped. And it's worth touching on that doomed is not a negative status condition. So it's just those other ones I said just a bit ago. And so it kind of gets countered by bait and chamomile and stuff. But it's the better of the traits, the two traits, when you're trying to play ahead, play for a lead. I'd say both of them are fairly decent, but they're just both kind of niche. Bully, I think, could use a damage boost because 25% just isn't a whole lot considering you have to have something faster than Grandpa and it actually applies a status. So one of the main things would be like a Fiery Soul from a Tolkien or something. If you get the Fiery Soul and then also attack Grandpa on the same turn, it'll get the Bully boost, which is kind of nice. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of situations. But anyways, we'll move on to the techniques. So Peck, story move, don't run it. Stare is a very nice support move, super good actually. It drops defense by 2 of a singular opponent. It doesn't deal damage, so it combos well with Hypnosis because you can drop the defense without waking up the opponents. It's a pretty low stamina cost, but all it does is drop defense by 2 stages. It's on no hold though, so kind of cool. It also gives alerts, but there aren't going to be a whole lot of times that outspeed Granpah to give it the sleep condition, so it won't be overly useful. Wind Blade did get buffed, but since Granpah has Wind Burst is what you're going to want. Because both of them are more like stamina efficient, lower damage wind moves. But Wind Burst is just the better version of Wind Blade. So I would never run Wind Blade. I would always run Wind Burst if you're looking for a cheaper option. Hypnosis. Granpah is, in my opinion, one of the better Hypnosis users because it can also raise speed with Turbo, which we'll touch on later. So I think the Hypnosis is like a must slot on Granpah. Like if you're opting to run Granpah over any other Wind Tem, you're going to want it for Hypnosis primarily. And Turbo, I suppose. But those two, like, they have so much value when used together that there's no reason not to. Cheer Up is very niche. It's a cool move, but I don't think Granpah's a great user of it. Usually slower supports are, and Granpah wants to be a faster support. Feather Gatling's it's a strong wind move, but it's physical. I don't see much justification in Granpah running it. Refresh is cool in that it actually gives Granpah a way to scale its special attack. The problem is it's low priority and it's on a hold. So effectively you're getting the boost the third turn Granpah's on the field, and it just doesn't have that kind of staying power with the stamina. So it's like super niche. Like if Bully was to get a boost, I think it would be more viable. Or maybe on a turn you did run Sacrifice and use it on your Granpah to gain the last rush boost. It could work, but I think that's really gimmicky and not something you'll typically want to run. Willpower Drain's a cool support move, but Granpah has so many better ones. I would say if Granpah had 5 move slots, Willpower Drain would be the choice. But for the most part, you're not gonna want to run it on the main moveset. But it does offer some really strong stamina control and also a little bit more stamina staying power for Granpah. It's just that the move itself is kind of low tempo. It doesn't offer a whole lot. So for the most part, you're just going to either want the damaging moves and a couple damaging moves and the Turbo Hypnosis combo. Hypoxia, this is going to be your main one nuking damage option. So if you're not too worried about stamina, because you're running a stamina item with either Fake Beard or like Sweatband, you'll probably run Hypoxia just for the higher damage turn 1, even though it's an insane high stamina cost. But it's one of your main damage options. Gust isn't real great. It offers like a trap support with synergy. And Electric's not an awful pair for wind types because it actually hits wind, or like opposing wind types, which Granpah can't really touch. But they both still get walled by Electric. So it's not a bad synergy type, but the damage is kind of low. It's on a hold. So unless you're looking for like because with synergy, you actually have a very high prio on it. So unless you're looking for like a faster finishing option for your Granpah, I would not recommend Gust. And even if you are looking for that option, it's just hard to pull off. I just can't recommend it. Hurricane, with the recent buff in this last patch, is actually a really strong move. Because it's a spread damaging move, which does like 92 damage with synergy, yeah. And it gives +2 speed, so it's actually insane. The problem is that Digital is a bad synergy type for wind because both of them are weak to electrics. So it's hard to find a field where it's going to give a lot of value. And as I already kind of mentioned with Willpower Drain, or when I was talking about it, is that Granpah already has 4 moves that it wants to use. And Hurricane, like it's another option kind of competing for that 5th slot that doesn't exist. So while you could run it, I think there's more consistent options. Turbo Choreography. This is kind of the main reason why you run Granpah. It's this combo with Hypnosis, as I said. So what Turbo Choreography does is it raises the speed of both Temps on your team by 2. If you have synergy with a wind ally, it gives +3 speed to both allies. So this makes Granpah able to ramp speed incredibly quick. And once it already gets 1-up, it can actually be like it can give on-tempo speed boosts. by basically being the fastest thing on the field. If any of you have played Pokemon and used Tailwind teams, this is probably the closest thing to that. It doesn't play exactly the same, but I'd say it's the closest equivalent. And not only does Granpah gain speed then, so it can get more on tempo speed buffs and deal damage or like debuffs with stare, but also really fast hypnos. Like being able to outspeed your opponents no matter how fast they are and putting them to sleep can be so incredibly important. And like there are other users of turbo choreography that I'll probably touch on in future videos. There's actually quite a few, but I say Granpah's one of the better ones. Wake up. Uh, Granpah doesn't want to run it. Misogi. So Granpah, like, this is actually a really cool support move, and after its distribution got nerfed a ton, Granpah still has access to it. It's a cool move. It's mainly just to in a meta where there's a lot of stat buffs, and this one is kind of that with all the Schweens and Yowlers around. You can just wipe everything with a non-synergy Misogi, and it will just set them back to zero. It's like a reset, basically. So it's actually really cool. But it's fighting for slots again. If you're running like a pure support Granpah, which is a viable set in my opinion, I think it might have a spot. If your opponents don't have any other ways, or if your team doesn't have any other ways to remove statuses. But it's also kind of questionable because at the same time you could slot this move for a niche use. You could run Stare to lower defense and just run a physical team and basically get the same effect that way. Because if your opponent is raising defense, you could either wipe all the defense stat buffs after like 3 turns, or from the start just start lowering their defense. And it's basically the same. But it definitely has some use. Confiscate, Brace, Untangle. Incredibly niche. I would not recommend any of them, especially not on Granpah. Humiliating Slap is a cool move, but the problem is that it's physical, and you're basically using it for the double defense drop, and Granpah already has Stare, and Stare doesn't need synergy to drop defense by 2 stages, so you can't really justify H-Slap. Tornado. Tornado, this is the other main damaging move you're going to be running on Granpah. It's your high damage, high prio option. It does cost a lot of stamina though, which brings us back to like Granpah stamina issues. But this is the one you're gonna want. Your typical move set, which I guess I'll just hop over to Temtem now. Typical move set's gonna be Hypoxia, Tornado, Hypnosis, and Turbo Choreography. Hypoxia is your turn 1 damage option. Tornado is your fast high damage option, and then Hypnosis and Turbo for good support options. So with this build, I put Fake Beard on this set, but honestly, like it doesn't matter which set you're running. Granpah kind of has the same idea, and it needs some sort of stamina item. Either Fake Beard or Sweatband are both super strong, and almost a must-have on Granpah. The trait Bully. Like, if you're running a purely offensive Granpah, like you want to deal a lot of damage and just kind of have support as a side option, I would say Bully's the better option. And you just kind of pair it with Tems that can inflict faster status conditions, like Tolkien that I mentioned. Otherwise, something like a faster wastewater from a Tem could be good. That ends up on just kind of how you're running speed on your team. If you have a Hazrat with 233 speed and you Wastewater and Hypoxia the same opponent, you would actually get the Bully boost from the Granpah because Hazrat's 1 speed faster and would inflict a Toxic Tick. And that can be a lot of damage. Rather than Last Rush, which doesn't offer that damage boost until you're behind, which you don't want to really get in a position where you are behind. So I think, yeah, Bully's kind of the better option when you're trying to stay ahead and just deal damage. As far as the moveset goes, or the TVs spread, I think 232 is a good point to hit. Because after a turbo, even if it's not synergy, a non-synergy turbo at 232 would make Tornado the fastest move on the field if your opponent doesn't have any speed boosts. Because 232 outspeeds Amphitheater at 1.5 times speed, which Turbo offers, and then Tornado adds another 1.5 times. So That was a lot of words, but basically, this is a fine breakpoint because you're already going to be raising speed, and you'll go really fast. This specific stamina breakpoint is so that even like with fake beard, you only need 61 stamina, maybe even a little less, but 61 is good to hit to have a 3-turn rotation with hypoxia, tornado, hypoxia. But by hitting 63, if your opponent has exhaust or mom's lunch and cancels out your fake beard, you can still have a 2-turn rotation with hypoxia tornado. And it is a situation that happens. So I would rather be safe than sorry. It's not like having more stam is going to hurt, and it's only a few extra TVs just for that just in case scenario. And then the rest is just maxing out special attack and then filling the rest in HP. Granpah's got so much bulk in its base stats that any amount of HP makes it able to live any singular super effective hit, I believe. I guess I should probably calc the Granpah versus like a Minotaur Paizo. Not that it's like a common thing that you're ever going to run into, but I'm just kind of curious. Okay, so yeah, it definitely wouldn't live that, but that's about the only thing. It's a max attack synergy Paizo from Minotaur, like 250 TVs. Yeah, but in general, like I say, this is a pretty good breakpoint. You can live like a T strike from anything. A couple neutral hits would be really good. So for this other move set, this one is kind of more of a support-oriented Granpah. I'm actually going to give this one a try on a team later this week, or I suppose next week because it's Sunday. But it's going to be its main purpose is to lower defense and then give your team the speed advantage and control with hypnosis. So kind of the same idea. It's just instead of trying to deal damage, you're just going to stare your opponents and support a physical team. I put as much speed as possible on here so that I can have as fast of sleeps as possible with hypnosis, and then the rest in HP so I can survive more hits. 65 is one of the stamina breakpoints. It's like 61, 65, 71, and then 81 or something are the main ones. But this allows Granpah to stay on the field for a long time. And then I opt for Windburst over Hypoxia because I'm not going to be clicking an offensive move very often. But if I can just chip my opponents down for basically like a 2 stamina net loss, I think that's worth it. And I always am in favor of having at least one damage option on a team. You might not always click it, but if you are running 4 support moves and your opponent is able to recognize that in a battle because you reveal all of them, then they'll just ignore you because they realize they can beat you with any Tem in a 1v1 in the late game. So I would always recommend running at least one attack move on any Tem. There have been like cases to prove me wrong in the past, but in the current meta, I don't think it's a very good option. So I already mentioned, like, you could swap out some of these moves for other stuff. Like, on the support set, you could swap Stare for, like, Willpower Drain if you wanted. You could technically run H-Slap over Stare, but I've been looking at the calcs. Like, H-Slap with no attack investment does about 10% damage, but you only get the double defense drop with Synergy, so unless you're running like 4 or 5 physical crystals on a team, which that's about all of them, I just can't recommend running H-Slap over Stare. I could run Masoji as well, since you already have a turn 1 with Windburst, and you already still have the sleep and speed control. So if you're running more of a special-oriented team rather than a physical attacking team, you could do that in place of Stare. But yeah, so I mean, this physical, or this high-damage Granpah set is going to probably be the more common one. Maybe I'm wrong. It probably is actually max HP fill special attack, because Granpah is meant to be slightly more of a support just with speed and sleep control, hypnosis. Both sets would work for sure. It's just kind of what you want it to do on your team. Like, Granpah doesn't have a whole lot of niches compared to other wind types. If you're just looking for a strong wind to put on your team, in this meta, Tuvine and Turok are probably going to be your main ones. Tolkien is also really solid. Other than that, there's just a lot of competition. Gazm was the best pair for electric teams, and so on. But I guess some good pairs for Granpah. So good pairs for it are Tems that aren't weak to electric but still have turbo choreography. If I can spell this right. There we go. All right, so Tataru has historically been one of Granpah's best partners because Tataru has soft touch, which allows it to hit a sleeping Tem without waking it up. And it also learns turbo. So you can turbo with Tataru, have Granpah put something to sleep, and then you can still deal damage to it with Tataru that same turn without waking it up. So that can be really important. Mashuk's another one that's pretty common just because it likes the speed scaling and it's able to scale damage super quick with Tireless. Nox is another option, though I think it's less favored nowadays. It's another Tem with Turbo and Hypnosis, but it's not weak to Electric, so it's still a decent pair for Granpah. As for bad matchups in the Granpah, I think the bad matchups are just going to be the popular wins that I just mentioned. The 2i evolutions, basically. Any electrics. There aren't a whole lot of popular electrics in the meta. I guess Nestle's probably the biggest one. And Garunder as well, since almost all of them run Thick Skin to essentially create a resist for wind. Other than that, I think that covers just about everything. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.